think McCluskey's been around longer than Oscar Mayer hot dogs.
Nehemiah, we miss you. We miss you. We wish you were here.
Yeah. Nehemiah is in New York City today, expanding his empire and using his gifts to grow his business. So we are proud of him. But we are going to forge ahead, and we have an exciting topic today. We're just three guys. Today we're just three guys anyway. We are crazy about our wives. We love our kids, and we want to crush it in business. And that's why we're here. And you know, in my mastermind group, I'll say our mastermind group because we all run this together, EFM Mastermind, we have a great group of guys there. We were talking about this idea of trusting God. And just before this recording, we started talking a little bit more about that, and we recognized that maybe some of us are hiding out in this place of trust, not taking action, calling it trusting God. So we thought it'd be valuable to have a conversation around what's the balance there between trusting and waiting and also taking action, using those gifts that God has given you, the talents, the treasures that we were meant to invest.
This is one of those episodes that we're looking around for a lightning bolt to come down, right?
Jamie, believe me, with you in this mix, we are always waiting for the lightning bolt to come down on these episodes. It's just kind of part of what we signed up for.
Yeah, no kidding. But this is really an issue, isn't it? I mean, some of us tend to go running out the door. We have an idea. We have something that needs to be done. We take control. We go after it and make it happen ourselves. And then there's some of us on the other end of the spectrum where we're just hanging out, waiting for something to be placed in our lap. Let's dive into this discussion because this happens in a lot of different areas of life. But let's, for today's sake, talk about those three big areas that we always love to talk about here: enterprise, family, and marriage. So let's start with business.
Mike, I'm really glad we're taking this up because that mastermind call on Monday, it was cool. We were talking there, of course, mostly about enterprise. These guys are growing their businesses. The topic for the day was trusting the Lord, and it was a lot with kind of that first scenario you laid out there where we tend in our own flesh because we got a piece of vision and we got a big idea and we got big goals and all, why we just rush out the door to make it happen and then kind of metaphorically over our shoulder go, oh yeah, and Lord, please bless this. I'm just trusting you to make this happen. And it's like, that ain't really trusting. And then when things start to fall apart, we're hand-wringing and super anxious and going, oh, Lord, I'm terrified. I'm not trusting. So the issue was trusting the Lord as Christians who are business owners, or here on our call today, are also, husbands and fathers. But yeah, most of what we camped out on in that mastermind was the importance of seeking the Lord and trusting in Him, that there are things that only He can do, doors that He can open that none can close, and others that He can close that none can open, including us, and so trusting Him for those things. But I'm glad we're taking this up today to look at the other side of it, because a lot of times we do the flip, we do the reverse. We kind of just stand there waiting under the open sky with open hands, just saying, Lord, I'm just waiting for you, trusting in you to bring the harvest of clients or business or more sales or whatever else. And I think if we could hear the voice booming from heaven, it might be, I'm waiting on you to take some action. So it's a balance. It really is a balance, isn't it?
For me, I'm feeling bipolar because sometimes I'm feeling sorry for myself and I'm asking God to make my problems go away. It feels more spiritual than anything else to commiserate with the Lord.
So, Jamie, what does that look like in your business, though? What's an example of how that plays out?
The biggest thing that is reoccurring in my life, a mountain of work that I'm trying to avoid. It builds up to a point. We talked about this on other episodes, right? The mountain of work.
Now we're hearing the real story here.
Oh, my gosh. I almost have to go to the Lord in a place of prayer without asking Him questions because it's glaring at me what I actually need to do, and I'm avoiding it. What the Lord would tell me is to get my butt in gear and make it rain. He's given me a really great business with lots of opportunities. I get bored and I get overworked and I just let it pile up, and then I commiserate and I bring the Lord into that. Very selective because I'm not asking Him certain questions that I know the answer for, right?
Well, I'm sure you're the only person who does this, Jamie. There couldn't be anybody else, none of us, and nobody listening that does that same thing.
A lot of times I kind of dread the amount of work that it's going to take for me to hit the goals that I want.
Jamie, thanks for being real about that, because I know you're not the only one that feels that way. But yeah, in this business thing, I think I've always fallen on the side of trying to make things happen and not going to God first and not casting a vision, bringing him into that vision, asking him to speak to me. I'm more of the mind of, okay, how can I make this thing work? All right, let's do everything I can to make it work. Almost like this striving and going against the wind to make it happen on my own. And like Chris, when you were laying out those two differences, I'm like, yeah, that's me running out the door and then saying, yeah, God, come check out what I started. You want to bless this thing for me, please? Then I wonder why I spin my wheels. Early on, when I started my coaching business, that's what I did. I just ran out there without doing any of that deep work and bringing God into it. That's where I fall in that continuum.
Yeah, well, I think most of us anyway recognize, sure, that we do fall on both sides, or at least had the potential to. Last night, I was out after a basketball game that my son played in. I was in the car by myself, and on the way home, I decided to stop at the new Hobby Lobby that just opened in our area. They have tons of framed prints and wood slat kind of stuff, and one that caught my eye, frankly, just kind of flew all over me, was one that said, "You need only trust in the Lord and wait on him." That was it. There was no other qualifier. That was it. And I'm sorry, but that is scripture taken out of context. And I was like, no, that's not quite what that means in the context. That's like in that situation, maybe. But as a general rule, you need only trust in the Lord and wait on him. No. That's why Paul later is writing about faith without works. And he said, it's dead. Okay. He goes like overboard, emphasizing, look, you show me your faith without works, I'll show you my faith by my works. Whoa. They go hand in hand. We have to have trust, and we better be getting out there and moving our butt. We have to do action. It's to be guided by his Spirit. It's to be seeking for his direction. But then when a little bit of light's given, even if the whole picture ain't clear, we better move with the light we're given. Probably only then will more light be given.
We have a Hobby Lobby in Franklin, and my kids are super into crafts, so we're going there all the time. I remember being at the register and picking up the biography on I forgot the guy's name. Do you guys know who started Hobby Lobby? But he's an incredible Christian entrepreneur.
Yeah,
and
Green.
I don't know if he's listening to the podcast, but he might want to change that plaque or something, right?
Yeah, it's almost like a farmer trusting God to plant the seeds for him. Yeah. And I'm just going to leave that one out right there and move on to the next point.
That's hilarious.
All right. Well, let's talk about what this looks like in your family. What about with your kids? Where do you find balance between trusting and taking action to invest in your kids?
Now you're getting personal, McGreevy. You're bringing our kids into this?
Yeah. It's going to get worse. Believe me. Hang on tight.
We talked about this on other episodes as far as being assertive, having a conversation, or spending time. I'm guilty of this. The default would be to pray more for your children instead of taking massive action to build rapport and to snuggle up with them and really make a close connection with them, especially when there's a wedge in between a particular relationship. I've talked to a lot of dads, and I fall into the same boat. Some of my kids, there's just more of a connection, and other ones, it could be a personality issue. For me, the ones that are more like me are the ones harder to connect with. It's really a challenge to trust in the Lord, to lean into the relationship and make a connection.
Jamie, I totally hear you with what you're saying. Chris, you've done this 7 times. You're in the middle of raising 7 kids, some of them adults already. You've had to wrestle with this at some point.
Yeah, big time. And I'll tell you what, one of the things that I find that is a real challenge is, especially at the end of the day, which is when we mostly see our kids, our wives and our kids, is usually at the end of the day, whether we work outside the home or even if we work inside the home. The bulk of the work's done during normal business hours, and then the evening comes. We're tired. We're tired, and sometimes it's not just that we don't have time, but in the time that we have there, we don't feel like we're not bringing our best. There's not a lot of us left. And the temptation to at least flip on the tube or actually plop down and sit in front of the tube and then channel chase and watch whatever happens to come on for a while and kill a few hours that could have been spent intentionally, albeit with less energy than you want, but still connecting with the kids, going for a walk, playing a game, wrestling on the floor, anything. I think that's one of the toughest challenges on the home front that we as entrepreneurial family men face, is that we can look at our kids, especially as they start to move from childhood into adolescence. And we know we're nervous about adolescence, and not without reason. Adolescence is a scary time as a parent. And we want to then say, well, Lord, I'm just going to trust you in this, because this is a big, scary place to be navigating. And I think it's that those places that we have to look at in the mirror. We don't have to wait for a booming voice from heaven. We just look in the mirror and say, Dad, are you making the time? Dad, are you carving out that? Are you pushing yourself when the energy is waning? Dad, are you flipping that television set off? Do you need to get rid of that stupid thing? What is it that you need to do on the action front as you couple that with trust that the Lord's going to help your kids navigate those years? Because they're coming, whether we're ready or not.
No kidding.
That takes more trust for me to take the action than probably anything in my life, because let's face it, you have 10 different opportunities every day to trust in the Lord by being assertive in a positive way. And the default would be, just like we talked about on other episodes, to just sit down and watch a football game and maybe feel like you're connecting with your child by having them sit next to you.
No kidding. I can't tell you how many guys that I've talked to that have heard silence when it comes to hearing from their dads about sex or sexuality. I mean, don't let that be you that is praying for the purity of your children, yet you haven't had a conversation about purity with them. I mean, that hit me hard, and it hits me over and over again when I hear full-grown men who have never been talked through that with their fathers.
Oh, which one's easier to do? Have the conversation or go into your closet and say a prayer?
Ouch. Yeah, no kidding. Let's talk about marriage a little bit. This is a tough one, right? How do we trust God for our wives, for our relationship, and at the same time be intentional about it? Make sure that we're doing the things that we are called to do to invest in this marriage. I know for myself, I've struggled in this area. One thing that's been hard for me is, as we have these 3 little kids, it just gets difficult on my wife. By my mistake, I've tried to step in and carry some of her burdens, some of her emotional burdens. And instead of trusting God and trusting that God is working in her life and letting him do that work, I'm getting in the way of that. So that is one area that I feel really called to step back and stop asserting myself and allow some space for God to do his work. What examples do you guys have of how you work that out?
I have one. And even though God has clearly given me direction in this, it's still a big challenge. So my relationship with my wife, I know that I'm supposed to bring God into the relationship and be praying with her. And I think the easy thing for me to do is go and pray for her, more so than I would, say, grab her hand and pray for her, or pray before we go to bed, or just pray when we have a problem. So I try to do it myself because, let's face it, it can be vulnerable sometimes for men to go deep with their spouse when there's something that is painful. It feels weird to be weak in front of my wife, and that's why I don't pray with her about certain things as often as I'd like.
Well, it's awesome to hear you say that out loud, because it's encouraging for me personally, and I'm sure it is going to be for someone else as well to hear that, because I don't think you're alone in that struggle at all, Jamie.
No, definitely not. I'll say at the same time, though, too, by way of further encouragement, that like with most things in life, the more we do something, the better we get at it. Not only is that the case with the vulnerability that you said a moment ago, it can be vulnerable. No, it is vulnerable. It just is. When we're transparent with our wives or with our kids about a failing, a shortcoming, a struggle that we have, something that we let them down in, whatever it is vulnerable. It requires it. It's an inherent piece of being actually real, is that you have to be transparent. That makes you vulnerable to somebody hurting you. Nobody can hurt you as badly as those who love you or those that you're trying to love. But my point is that the more we do it, I've actually found myself, remember now I'm in my mid-50s, but I found myself loving and looking for those opportunities, because when I move toward them and actually embrace them, inviting them, it's like a great workout when you finally feel the burn. People that dread working out are like, oh, I get so sore and I can barely work around. Then the more you do working out, you're like, oh yeah, feel the burn, man. Come on, no pain, no gain. It's the same thing in deepening of actual intimacy in the people that you care so much more about in this world than anybody else, that when you realize, it's in those moments that's when we bond more deeply, that's when the greater growth happens, then you're like, okay, so when's the next one? How can we foster it? When can we move toward it? So I do mean that sincerely. It's not that it's ever not hard, or maybe even not scary. Christ said, if you would be my disciple, you must take up your cross and follow me. Like, embrace the hard stuff, because that's where we grow. When we're weak, we're strong. That's where we die to self, and then he becomes more manifest. That's where your marriage, that's where your parenting deepens, is in those spaces. So increasingly, I just find I don't want to avoid them. I don't want to look for a way out. I come down pretty hard on myself when I find that I am. So that's not meant to shame you in any way. Keep moving. It actually has an upside to it. And the trade-off is far better than the consequence of not stepping up to intimacy.
Wow.
Amen, brother.
I love it. Man, we had our own little coaching session right here on the podcast. Awesome. Well, where do you find yourself on this continuum? Are you somebody that tends to hang back and wait and not take any steps at all and just wait for God to put something in your lap or lay something directly in front of you? Or are you the type of person that runs out the door, takes control, does everything on his own, and then later on, then I'll bring God into it? I want to challenge you. Move more toward the middle. If you're tipping the scales on one side and you know you need to move back toward the middle, this is your challenge to do so. Pray with your legs. Move forward with God as you take action. Trust God. You have a part. Invite God into it. If you want to go deeper with us, and you want to be a part of this thriving community, go to our website at efmlife.com, and you'll find a place to join up into our private Facebook group. You'll see a lot more about us there. We'd love to connect with you.
For show notes, resources, and to connect with us, visit www.entrepreneurialfamilyman.com.
You've been listening to the EF Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast.